Hi, Arcfieldweather.com meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Tuesday morning, October the 8th. We'll focus in on Hurricane Milton. Climbed all the way up to a Category 5 storm on Monday. Now a very strong Category 4 with maximum sustained winds currently at 155 miles per hour or so. The peak winds that I saw late yesterday up to about 180 miles per hour in terms of the maximum sustained winds. It intensified rapidly over a 24-hour period. In fact, the central pressure dropped to below 900 millibars later in the afternoon on a Monday, down to about 897 millibars, which is about 26.44 inches. So take a look at your barometer to see how low that is. Again, 26.44 inches. Now, when it reached that Category 5 status yesterday with 100-mile-per-hour winds, all the environmental conditions that you can think of were absolutely perfect. That does not last indefinitely. At the peak yesterday, again, winds were 180 miles per hour. You had the perfect scenario of convergence in the lower levels, divergence aloft, low wind shear, and of course it's sitting over some very warm waters of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, in the overnight hours, it did weaken slightly as it, two reasons really. It encountered the Yucatan Peninsula region. By that I mean it was able to draw in some drier air from the landmass of northern Mexico into the system. And again, it's going through what we call an eye wall replacement cycle. That tends to cause some fluctuations in the overall storm structure, and winds dropped from 180 miles per hour late on Monday to now 155 again, which is still a very strong major hurricane, just on the brink of getting back to Category 5, which certainly is on the table. Here's a look at the latest colorized infrared imagery loop. You can see kind of changes going on in the eye wall right here, and again, it's not unusual for storm systems to go through eye wall replacement cycles, which can cause some fluctuations in the pressure pattern and the overall wind field. Now, what I expect to happen right here, and by the way, this is the outline of the Yucatan Peninsula region of Mexico. It'll continue to move in an east-northeast track over the next, let's say, 6 to 12 hours or so, and then turn more to the north and east. And this is Tampa Bay right here, and it's still destined to make landfall late tomorrow night, right near or over Tampa Bay. It's still Prague to go, right in that general region. Of course, that would cause a significant storm surge in and around the Tampa Bay region, which we'll talk about in a moment or two. Could reach 10 to 15 feet in and around the Tampa Bay region. Again, we're talking later tomorrow night into the day on Thursday. So here's the latest look at Hurricane Milton. Again, a very strong Category 4 storm at the moment with those maximum sustained winds at 155 miles per hour. Well, here's the official positioning of Hurricane Milton as of early this morning, early Tuesday morning, right here just to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula region. Again, is a strong Category 4 hurricane. It'll move generally east-northeast for the next several hours, then kind of take a turn to the north and east as it becomes influenced by an upper-level trough that will be sliding towards the Gulf of Mexico. Likely landfall right in this area right here late tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, even into tomorrow night in and around the Tampa Bay region, then continue on a track as a hurricane across the peninsula of Florida right here as a hurricane, and then exit out over the open waters of the southwestern Atlantic by Thursday. So again, it very likely reaches landfall as a major Category 3 hurricane, perhaps Category 4, in and around the Tampa Bay region late tomorrow night time frame. Crosses the state, certainly has an impact on central and eastern Florida as well. Orlando, for example, will have a big impact. If in fact it lands as a Category 3, it could become a Category 2 and then a Category 1 by the time it reaches the east coast of Florida. But nonetheless, as a hurricane, it'll cross over into eventually the southwestern part of the Atlantic Ocean. Well, here's a look at the latest storm surge, the peak storm surge forecast by NOAA's National Hurricane Center. Again, with landfall in and around the Tampa Bay region in a fashion like this, a track like that, that puts Tampa Bay and areas just to the right of that landfalling hurricane in the likely most significant impact region with respect to the storm surge, perhaps as much as 10 to 15 feet in and around this area right here. Now, farther down along the coast, it'll slowly drop off in terms of the height of the peak storm surge that is expected. But even down in the Keys here, you'll have perhaps 1 to 3, maybe 2 to 4 feet above ground level here. So that is certainly not insignificant, but the worst storm surge appears to be in and just to the right of where this system is expected to make landfall, somewhere right near Tampa Bay, perhaps just to the north of Tampa Bay, again late tomorrow night. So again, 10 to 15 foot storm surge is a possibility in the west central coastal region of Florida. Well, before we take a look at some of the computer forecast models and their projected paths for Hurricane Milton, I want to take kind of a historical look here at the Tampa Bay region specifically, and it is not often at all that Tampa Bay gets a direct hit. Not saying this will be a direct hit, but it's certainly something that is on the table. Back in 1921, and this is a storm track of a hurricane that had a direct hit on Tampa Bay back in 1921. The track started in the Caribbean Sea, cut through between the Yucatan Peninsula region and the western part of Cuba, and then turned as a major hurricane right towards the Tampa Bay region. This is just about 100 years ago, back in 1921. There was another storm even before that that we have good records of, and I'll shift to that right now. Right here, this is a storm from way back in 1848. We have good information that suggests that this actually started in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico, much like this current situation with Milton, then cut across the Gulf and made a direct impact on the Tampa Bay region as a major hurricane. Doesn't happen often. It's not totally unprecedented, though. Certainly we have records of a storm making a pretty direct hit on Tampa Bay, 1921 and 1848. So this is certainly something that is unusual. It's not all that often that you get a storm system that forms out of the southwestern Gulf of Mexico and it slides to the east into the west central part of Florida. Now let's walk through some of the overnight model runs, and I'm using the synoptic scale models right now, the European, and then we'll take a look at NOAA's GFS and the Canadian model. And in all cases here, we start off this morning with that hurricane just to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula region. And it slides to the east-northeast and then to the north and east here. And this is into the day on Wednesday. And finally, we get to Wednesday night into the overnight hours going into Thursday. So a little bit slower than it has been in some recent model runs. We're talking now landfall maybe tomorrow night into the early morning hours of Thursday. And right here is Tampa Bay. Now let me point out that it's a rather compact storm system right now, and certainly it was small, relatively small on Monday. When you have a relatively small system, it can undergo some rapid changes, and indeed it did rapidly intensify. It could also rapidly weaken the smaller the storm is, with that very small concentric pinhole of an eye. As it approaches the Florida coast on Wednesday, there will be some increase in the wind shear that could certainly weaken the system slightly in those hours just before landfall, right in this time period right here. Again, there's an upper level trough that is starting to approach the Gulf of Mexico. So an increase in wind shear could cause some weakening. However, it still is certainly on the table that it makes landfall as a major hurricane, let's say a Category 3, sometime tomorrow night. Now, when a system like this slowly weakens, it tends to broaden out and becomes actually a larger storm. So even though the concentric eyewall winds may not be quite as strong as it was earlier in the cycle of the system. It tends to become a larger storm, and that's why we'll have an impact all the way down to the Keys, for example, later Wednesday into a Wednesday night. So again, even though it may weaken a little bit, that's the good news. The bad news is that it'll become a little bit larger of a storm, and its wind field will spread out. Let's now move ahead a little bit more, and here you notice a little bit of weakening just before landfall, 967 millibar to 971. Then it makes landfall sometime later tomorrow night into the early morning hours on Thursday, and it'll continue as a hurricane across the central part of Florida and exit out on Thursday into the open waters of the the southwestern Atlantic Ocean. Now let's take a look at NOAA's GFS model run from last evening. This is again the 0Z run. The prior one was the European model from 0Z. Starting off just to the north of the Yucatan Peninsula region, very similar track. East-northeast and then northeast, slams into the Tampa Bay region later tomorrow night into the early morning hours of Thursday, likely as a major hurricane, although it may undergo some weakening in those hours just before landfall due to an increase in wind shear. Then it crosses the state, and this assures significant winds. It's heavy rainfall throughout the central part of Florida and the eastern part of Florida, and certainly a storm surge, a big issue along the west coast of Florida. Exits out over the southwestern part of the Atlantic Ocean by midday on Thursday and continues on that eastward track at that point. Well, now let's walk through the Canadian model, and similar to the European, the GFS has an east-northeast track for the next 6 to 12 hours or so, and then northeast will push forward here, makes landfall similar to the other models right near the Tampa Bay region, right here. In this particular case, a little bit to the south of Tampa Bay with respect to the Canadian model. That is on the table, and that will certainly help in the storm surge situation in the Tampa Bay itself. If it ends up going a little bit to the south of Tampa Bay, and again, peak storm surge is typically where it makes landfall and to the right. So this subtle difference between the other models can be a huge difference for the immediate Tampa Bay region. We'll see how this evolves over the next 12 to 24 to 36 hours or so. Again, this is late tomorrow night into the early morning hours of Thursday. Then it crosses over the state and out over the open waters of the southwestern Atlantic on Thursday afternoon, Thursday evening time frame. Well, the last map I want to show is something we posted on our tropical outlook. It's right there from our seasonal outlook issued back in the spring. This is not unusual for a La Nina type of tropical season, in that you get a lot of activity over the Caribbean Sea and the Gulf of Mexico. This is something that is rather common with La Nina summer seasons, and we do have La Nina, which is colder than normal waters in the equatorial part of the Pacific Ocean. So this is certainly the pattern that we've had for the last several weeks, and it is likely not the end of a Caribbean or a Gulf of Mexico tropical storm system. So yes, Hurricane Milton will cross out into the southwest, cross Florida and move out into the southwestern Atlantic, but it certainly doesn't mean the tropical season is over. This is the area we will continue to look over the next couple of weeks. That's it for now. For ArcfieldWeather.com, this has been meteorologist Paul Dorian.